Other developments in Malawi's political scene. We're now joined in studio by Malawi's Minister of Communications and Technology. It is Honourable Michael Botomani. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to South Africa and to the programme.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's a pleasure to be in your programme this afternoon.
All right. Okay. So as far as we understand, an election happened. Opposition went to courts and said that, look, these are irregularities. The Constitutional Court heard this and decided that this election should be annulled and that we should go again. Your thoughts on this process? It seems pretty clear.
Yeah, first of all, I think it is important to understand that the fact that we have come this far, it means that Malawi is one of the most democratic countries. And in fact, this administration is one of the most democratic administrations, because if you have followed the events from the day it was announced that President Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika is or has won the elections, to the day that it was announced by the Constitutional Court that now there is a nullification of that presidential election case, the process, everything that has happened in between, you conclude that Malawi is a very democratic country. I am saying this because of so many events that have happened. First and foremost, it is important to understand that we went to the elections on the 21st of May to elect the councillors, the members of parliament, and the president, all at the same time, and it is called a tripartite election. When the results came out, and in this case, they announced the councillors, they announced the members of parliament, and then the president. The opposition leaders, the ones that stood in the elections, Dr. Lazarus Chakwera of MCP and Dr. Salos Chilima of UTM, they went to court and to seek redress. The fact that the presidential election did not go well. So they only singled out the presidential election and not the whole process of the election. And it is very surprising, actually, when we stand here to see that the verdict that came out from the Constitutional Court upheld, the arguments that were brought by the opposition leaders. So the fact that only the presidential vote was messed up and not the whole election.
But the courts can only deal with what's before them. So if the opposition only came with the presidential election, surely then the courts can only deal with that matter. If people had issues with the parliamentary and the council elections, they too should have come forward.
Well, I agree with you to say that the courts could only deal with what came before them. But if you have read the judgment itself, there are certain issues that the court has dealt with which had not been presented to them.
Right.
For example, the issue of 50+1. The petitioners did not bring that issue to the court, but the judgment has included the 50+1 issue, which was not in the presented to the
So this is in terms of who constitutes a majority and winning an election.
Correct.
At the moment, the law says a majority, but it doesn't say what that majority means. And the Constitutional Court now has said that now must be 50+1 in the next election. Is that what you're saying?
That is what is surprising, because you remember there was a Chakwamba case way before this. The Chakwamba case, the Supreme Court of Malawi, set out the verdict to say that the majority means the first past the post, and that's what is in the Constitution right now. So, if you go in the whole world, there's no court, the lower court, which can go against the ruling of the Supreme Court. So, what has happened now? The Constitutional Court has gone against the ruling of the Supreme Court in the Chakwamba case. That's why we're saying.
Which court is lower in Malawi? Is it the Constitutional Court or the Supreme Court? Which is the higher court?
Well, you see, the establishment of the Constitutional Court is only the processes that happen in the judiciary. It's the arrangement that was done in the judiciary, setting up the Constitutional Court. But the Supreme Court, actually the higher court, is the Supreme Court of Malawi.
So the Supreme Court can actually, on appeal, overturn the Constitutional Court?
It is possible to do that. And that's the reason why the respondents in the case, and that is President Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika and the Malawi Electoral Commission right now, have lodged their complaint to the Supreme Court of Appeal because they are dissatisfied.
Right. Do you acknowledge that there were irregularities in the election?
Yes, that's what has been found out. But you see, I'm sure you've been following the elections all across the world, and particularly in Africa. There's no election that just goes without certain elements of irregularities. So what the court has said, yes, there were irregularities, based on procedures, and that is what they've based, mainly based on nullifying the presidential report.
Is there no logic, perhaps, to say because the win was such a small margin that these errors could have been enough to alter the result, and therefore to safeguard against this, a better safety measure would be to have 50+1, so that maybe two candidates fight for the election in the end, because then there'll be a clearer picture who the people want to lead them.
Perhaps that should have been it should have been the Malawians through their members of parliament to decide that, because in Malawi it is the members of parliament that hold the power of the people. And if you followed in the recent past, particularly in the last cohort of parliament, the issue of 50+1 was brought in parliament, but majority of members of parliament in Malawi rejected it because they had the views, from their people. And now it is being brought but through the Constitutional Court, and that is why it is surprising. And let me also just mention that, yes, the Constitutional Court...
What's your concern about 50+1? It seems to make sense that 50+1, that means a clear majority of the country has voted for a candidate.
Yeah, but everything that we do has to go by the Constitution, because our Constitution currently does not provide the 50+1. So we cannot just jump the guns if the parliament has not decided. In our country, it is parliament that is supreme in terms of making the laws. It is not the courts that make the law. The courts only interpret what parliament has brought before them.
All right, in terms so you're saying that this interpretation by the Constitutional Court that 50+, a majority, as it's written in the Constitution, should mean 50+1. Their interpretation, you're saying, is incorrect?
Yes, it is incorrect, because they cannot go by what the Supreme Court of Appeal already judged on this.
So what happens next? You've got Malawians that are shutting down MEC offices, protesting, and they've been protesting since the election results. They're clearly not happy. The president then has a huge job if he doesn't allow this election process to happen.
Yeah, but I think to say that Malawians are not happy and they are the ones that have closed the Malawi Electoral Commission offices, I think it's an overstatement because these are members of the political parties. As a matter of fact, it is the organization called the Human Rights Defenders Coalition that has been organizing demonstrations. They partnered with the political parties, the major political parties, the Malawi Congress Party and the UTM. So if you see people in the streets, those are members of these political parties. So it is the generalization to say that Malawians are not happy.
But because even then, the numbers are unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this.
Well, the numbers are unprecedented because these are people that are drawn to the cities from the outskirts. Those people that you've seen in the streets, they're being ferried from elsewhere to come to the street to demonstrate. And it does not happen even here in South Africa.
So,
when people
demonstrate,
they're not ferried from elsewhere.
The majority of Malawians wouldn't be behind this.
Come again with your question.
What are you saying, that majority of Malawians wouldn't be behind this and that they're happy with the election result?
Well, majority of people in Malawi voted for Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika.
No, not the majority of people.
Exactly, according to the Constitution right now, because it's first past the post.
Yeah, but it wasn't the majority.
It's the majority of votes. The majority of votes, when they counted, they found
votes,
that
not the majority.
Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika had more votes than the rest of the candidates.
There is a difference between majority and most votes. The majority of Malawians means more than 50% of Malawians, and that's the question I'm asking you. Do more than 50% of Malawians believe that an election should happen again?
Well, this is an academic argument. Perhaps we can put across. But what I'm saying is the Constitution right now, says whoever gets the majority votes or more votes than the rest of the candidates becomes the president. And that's exactly what happened in this case.
Right.
So if you say, yes, the president, Professor Mutharika, got more votes than the rest of the candidates.
Again, the margin was quite close. And so I wonder, wouldn't the president want to put it beyond doubt? Run the election again so that it's clear that he is the people's favorite?
Well, let me say this, that the president is not afraid of running another election. In fact, as he stands today, he's very ready. And he has actually challenged that if he runs again, or if the elections take place again, he's going to win. And that's a fact. But because he's got the right as a candidate, and as a Malawian, and as a human being, he's got the right to seek redress in the higher court. And that is why he's gone to court for the Supreme Court to interpret what has come out in the Constitutional Court. So he is not afraid to go for the next elections. He's done that. This is the second time he's won, and he's challenged that he's going to win again if we're going to go for yet another.
Do you know who was manipulating the procedures? Because in the end it favored the president. Do you have any idea who was behind that?
No, nowhere in the judgment has it been said that the president himself was involved in the maladministration of the vote processes. Nowhere in the judgment. There's no issue of rigging that has come out in the judgment. In this case, Professor Mutharika has just come out as a victim because of the irregularities that happened during the administration of these, of these votes. So there's nothing like the votes were manipulated to favor Professor Mutharika. There's nothing like that.
All right. So are you then in agreement that the Malawi Electoral Commission members, including the chairperson, must then be removed because they were responsible then ultimately for the problems?
Well, that is what has come out in the verdict of the Constitutional Court. They have called upon Parliament, in this case the Public Appointments Committee, to have time scrutinizing the commissioners and then to recommend that they should go.
Would the president be happy if Ms. Ansah is removed?
Well, I cannot speak what is on the president's mind.
But you are the spokesperson.
Exactly, but I cannot speak on what is on the president's mind. But what I'm saying is that the president is not happy with the verdict that came out. Now, Dr. Jane Ansah is the chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. She's the one who oversaw, the whole process.
But she's failed, right?
Well, I mean, it's the Supreme Court who say that. At the present time,
but you saw the irregularities, Tipex on tally sheets.
Now, let me tell you about Tipex. Yes, it is true that in certain constituencies or certain polling centers, we saw the tally sheets being Tipexed. But you see what? It is surprising that they only singled out the presidential votes or the presidential tally sheets, because even some of the members of parliament that are in parliament today, in their constituency, it has been found that their tally sheets are also Tipexed.
So you're
saying some of them are in the opposition.
If the presidential election gets rerun, all the other elections should be rerun as well?
Actually, that is the debate that is there today. Because the court case now, or the Constitutional Court verdict, has opened more or less like a can of worms. The former members of parliament now, the ones that lost in May 21, have gone to court to say, if you can declare the presidential vote to be null and void, it means there has to be all the election, because we are voting all at the same time. How do you declare the Malawi Electoral Commission incompetent? And yet the Malawi Electoral Commission not only oversaw the presidential election, it oversaw the parliamentary election as well as the council election. So all these elections should be declared null and void. That is what in the courts right now, lodged by the former members of parliament. So where we're going, it's going to be an interesting period. We'll be watching what's going to happen. Our eyes are on the constitutional, on the Supreme Court of Appeal, to hear what they're going to say. But all is well in Malawi right now. There is peace. Government is in place, and all is going as smooth as possible.
Do you think it's too expensive to rerun them, or perhaps the cost of not doing it is far too great?
Well, it is not cheap to run an election in Africa. I'm sure you know that. The Malawi Electoral Commission say they need at least 48 billion Malawi kwacha to run another election. They are also saying that it is not enough the period that have been given by the Constitutional Court. They said 150 days from the 3rd of February. It's not enough. They need at least 260 days to run a credible, fair, election. So yes, I would say it's not cheap. It's expensive. But at the end of the day, we'll see what will happen in the next few
abide by the court rules.
Yes, so we'll all hear from what the Supreme Court of Appeal will say.
All right. Minister Botomani, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Zikomo Kwambiri.
Zikomo, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have business news for you. Stay with us.